Green Arrow. The 80th anniversary super spectacular 100-page extravaganza amazeballs thingamajig. That is what we're going to start off with today. And I have to say, for as far as rosters for the creative teams go for these 100-page specials, this is probably one of the more densely skewed to our tastes as far as they've been, because I just looking at the writers quickly. The names Mariko Tamaki, Tom Taylor, Jeff Lemire, Benjamin Percy.
Well,
just stick out immediately.
And not just Ben Percy, but Ben Percy and Otto Schmidt.
Of course, yes.
And then Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino.
It does look like rebirth Green Arrow when we get to that, the story with Schmidt and Percy.
Yeah, and then we get, Mike Grell, of course, doing a story.
Some classic stuff, yeah.
Right, but then you also have Ram V doing a story, and Devin Grayson. So, but yeah, no, this might be. I feel this is one of the stronger ones, which weirdly, this and Green Lantern both came out real strong. I think because it didn't feel like just a thrown together anthology, like some of the other ones, like the Catwoman or Joker one. I just felt like they threw those together. This, I almost feel like these creators had a story in mind for Green Arrow.
I don't know if I feel as strongly.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed enough of it, but I don't know if I feel as I don't know. It's more special in some of the other ones that we've done or covered.
Well, I'm also very Green Arrow is one of my favorite characters. I do enjoy Ollie quite a bit, so I'm a bit biased.
Yeah, I mean, the first story then is Tamaki and Javier Rodriguez on the art, and this is a very classic. I've never read like a Golden Age era Green Arrow story, but I'm assuming this is what it's harkening back to. And I will say this: I never knew about the arrow signal. Okay, this is a new thing to me.
So this is what I love is how much it is kind of making fun of how close Green Arrow and Batman were, especially in the early days.
Mm-hmm.
Like, down to the fact that Green Arrow had an arrow cave and an arrow car. So I like that here. Also, I'm revisiting, not revisiting, I'm visiting for the first time because I realized I never read Stars and Stripe. So, coming across the Seven Soldier stuff like we did in the Stargirl Spring Break, this very much felt like that. So I appreciate Tamaki really hitting that kind of golden agey vibe here.
Yeah. Although the Batman comparison actually is more in the Taylor story, which comes up a bit later.
Yeah, but here, I mean, this is almost a Batman and Robin story with arrows, which I think is what makes it, to me, funny.
Oh, sure, but in terms of the writing is actually pointing it out and making a joke about it. That's in the Taylor story. Here, it does feel like an old school Batman and Robin story. I'm not going to argue with that. It does. It absolutely does. There's a bank robber, a bandit who keeps disappearing. Somehow has found a way to turn himself invisible. I would go too far to say that Roy feels like very Jason Todd in some of these moments where he gets really upset and angry because the bandit keeps getting away. So they go out. The fact that, I mean, one of the comparisons between Batman and Robin in terms of old school stuff is that the narration refers to Roy as Oliver's ward. And I'm like, come on now. Come on.
Well, and that's what I mean. That's why it's so funny that you had these characters operating at the same time. This is, probably mid-40s. This is harkening back to, and that's prime Batman and Robin era. Just think about what the book stands looked like at that time, where Batman and Robin, and then Green Arrow and Speedy. And one's definitely ripping off the other. I'm sure. So,
but
yeah, calling him his ward.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Green Arrow was ripping off Batman. Just a long shot, but
yeah,
I've got a good feeling. I think that we have to talk about next, because there's a page where Oliver's showing him all of his trick arrows. And is it just me, or do one or two of these look like weird sex toys? Like,
yeah, it's a bit.
Like the mass hysteria arrow. That looks like some sort of massager, shall we say?
Yes, and the black light arrow, not the electric arrow.
Oh yeah,
scary.
I wouldn't shove that up anywhere.
No.
I mean the smoke arrow looks like it's maybe tickles.
A tickler.
Yeah, got a bit of a tickler vibe. I'm just saying, there's a surprising amount of these that look like they could be used sexually.
I mean, it's also the phallic nature of an arrow.
The phallic nature of an arrow.
Yeah,
an arrow, something that's usually shaped like this, like with sharp edges.
But it's also a rod that Yeah, I'm just saying. The one that Roy's looking his eye down also does not help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so we get to see kind of him going out of his way to use these trick arrows to catch the vanishing bandit, and come to behind that they end up watching a bunch of what were they? Body paint acrylic arrows.
The acrylic arrow, yes. Well, no, because they launch all the other ones, and then Oliver just launches this one arrow, which covers them in paint, and then it's like, oh, there we got him. Okay, off we go.
And I also love that Roy launches the handcuff arrows as if that is something that is aerodynamic.
There's kind of a joke ending here, because I was wondering, like, because obviously these are all short stories, and I was like, wait, he's getting out of prison? Where's this going? It has to be ending soon. And it's got a bit of a joke ending where the bandit wants to sell to some mob bosses one of Oliver's arrows that he's grabbed. But Oliver then says that he took some influence from the bandit and presumably has installed the invisibility tech on them. So when these mob bosses who like paid his bail and got him out of jail look at the box and there's no arrow in it, they go to beat him up. And that's kind of the joke ending. I mean, it's a little bit silly because, like, surely if they just turned the box upside down, they'd hear it clunk in the table because it'd still be there.
Yeah, but they're mob bosses that are looking for instant gratification. So
yeah, I suppose. It's a fun time, though. It's a silly story.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I like the art style in it. It definitely harkens back to that. All the clean lines.
Yeah, it's very clean.
It feels of an era. So I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's an enjoyable story.
A lot of flat colors, a lot of a blockiness and stuff like that. Like it's obviously it's still very modern compared to what we'd actually get back then, but it's that way where it kind of emulates it, but still feels quite pleasing to a modern eye.
Yeah.
So that is the Mariko Tamaki story. The second story is the Tom Taylor story, which I am accidentally just scrolling through because I have a thumb down too long. So it's called Punch and Evil. It's Tom Taylor, Nicholas Scott. So what a pair that is.
Yeah.
Right away.
I'm saying my one criticism out of the way is that the coloring here, it does not work for Scott art for me. I like when Scott's art is a little brighter, and this just it added almost like this dinginess to it. That I don't know if I particularly liked, but the rest of the art is fantastic. Like no other complaints.
Yeah, I never really had a problem. I think it was going for kind of a vibe of like the 40s or 50s to give it an old school sense. I think that's what the coloring was there for. It's one of those things though where after a page or two, once you get, because the panel on the second page of Dinah walking in and all, like, she looks amazing, and so by the time I got there, I was so used to the coloring at that point that it didn't really matter that much.
Yeah.
But this is about Dinah wants Oliver to train to be a better fighter, so he's training with Wildcat. Although notably, he does not know it's Wildcat. He just thinks it's a boxer named Ted. Yes, he's just a guy named Ted, and he gets his ass whipped in the boxing ring, and he gets beat up over and over again. But he's determined to keep coming back, and he's like, "No, why can't I just use arrows? I can shoot them from far away." And Ted breaks a bunch of his arrows. Says, "No, you can't shoot these. You're going to have to learn to fight up close. Here you go." Because you can't punch someone from a distance. And of course, this entire story from Tom Taylor is all about building up to maybe where the creation of the boxing glove arrow comes from.
Yeah.
Because that's how we end the story. We have Yellow Wasp who comes in and attacks them. Actually hits Wildcat in the head with a laser blast. So Oliver grabs the boxing glove and fires an arrow to win the
Mhm.
fight, gets an uppercut effectively, and that's kind of her joke ending. But of course, I did enjoy because Oliver at the start of this, probably my favorite joke of the whole thing, is right at the start where Oliver says, "Oh, come on, I'm already a vigilante. What could I really learn from you?" And then Batman like walks out the locker room saying, "All right, thanks, Ted. I'll see you next week." The idea that Batman is learning things from Ted, and Batman is obviously a better fighter than Green Arrow is.
Yeah, and I do love that though, because I do love that Ted Grant is the, you know, like Batman's taken all kinds of martial arts, but you got to learn brawling from Ted Grant, and I do like that. And I love that Ollie is the complete opposite of Batman in that way, where he thinks he's got everything figured out, whereas Bruce is always looking for something new, and he thinks this is all a waste of time.
Yeah, but of course, Bruce on his way out does say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Where's your arrow car or your arrow cave?" Or he just he throws some shade at him, and Oliver feels the cold stare of the bat.
We are spoiled with Tom Taylor right now doing a Superman book and Nightwing. I would love for him to do an Ollie and Dinah, Black Canary and Green Arrow. He just gets these characters.
When he's done with one of the other runs, sure. We're reaching critical mass here on how many runs you can have going at one time. So that was the Taylor story. The next story
really good.
is Who Watches the Watchtower, and it's Stephanie Phillips writing with Chris Mooneyham on the art. And what's so funny, the last story being a Wildcat story, is that this story reminded me a lot of an early issue of GSA where Wildcat is left on his own at the GSA headquarters and has to fight off some villains on his all by himself, and he's injured as well in that particular issue. So Green Arrow is pissed. He's pissed that he's been left behind, whilst the rest of the team are going off to
duty.
Yeah, they're all going off to fight some sort of space battle, and he's like, "Oh shit, I get to stay here on my own. Well, I hope I'm just going to watch TV." But of course, some aliens show up, and we get. Honestly, I thought the art here was pretty good. Like the action of him jumping around, firing the arrows. There's nice coloring as well. I think the green really pops against the explosions and the blue backgrounds and stuff like that. And he wins this fight. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But he does get to use a sort of he picks up an arrow or a bow that's like an alien bow, and he's like, "Oh, I can't remember if this is the bow that does this from this planet or the bow that does this from this dimension." But we'll find out. Yeah.
But I did like Ollie's whole thing of, "Hey, we're about to find out what this one does," and he says even, "Cool." But yeah, Stephanie Phillips. I love her voice for Ollie here, and then the rivalry with Hawkman, because that's one of my favorite things, that Hawkman and Green Arrow do not like each other. So to see them, hitting back at each other here, and then at the end, Hawkman sees one of his helmets that was on display is got damaged, and says it was an antique, and Ollie's like, "Oh no, that was old."
Honestly, because the whole thing at the end is he's pretending that nothing was happening, and he's just kind of being smug about everything. But my favorite part of that whole page is the panel right at the top where he's putting he's put duct tape over all the damaged glass and all the cases and stuff. He's trying to hide it. Nothing happened. It's fine. I had it under control.
Yeah.
So
pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it's a funny story. I mean, it's funny because obviously those first two stories had knockout creative teams, and I got to this third one expecting it to be a dip, and I ended up maybe even liking it more in some ways than some of the first couple. So it's on top form so far as an anthology goes. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
We got the Mick Grill story up next, which. I mean, I didn't love this story. I think it obviously makes sense to have a Grill story in here.
Yeah.
And he's got a really good voice for Oliver. But as far as just these stories on their own go, which is him and, Shadow taking on some smugglers, some sex traffickers at the docks, there's not really much to it.
No. It does feel like it's from the Longbow Hunters, because this is a different Ollie. This is an Ollie that has zero issue with killing people. Especially, as we find out, human traffickers. So help me out here. At the beginning, is that Connor Hawks? No, that's Dinah then, right?
I'm pretty sure that's Dinah, because Dinah up until whenever they changed it, naturally had dark hair, and then it was a blonde wig she put on when she was.
Because I almost had to pull out of that one just because I didn't see the wig until right now.
Yeah, because
on the page.
Because the blonde wig for Dinah was basically the equivalent to Clark Kent's glasses, or vice versa, really. But you know what I mean.
Right.
That's the effect. Because that's why when I learned about Black Canary, that was one of the key details that I first ever learned about her, was that she's not really blonde. That's just like the costume. But at some point they decided to change that because they just wanted her to be blonde, I guess. But
yeah,
you know, that's what it is. Which admittedly, it's not a recent change. I mean, she
no.
like I'm pretty sure she was just blonde and like Birds of Prey in the 90s. So it's been a while. But yeah. So there you go. Yeah, not much to say really. It's a fight scene. It's make real art, so it looks like old school Green Arrow from like the late 80s, early 90s, which is nice. But there's not really much to the story. It just kind of whatever. After that, we have the Ram V story, which is kind of so it's got the old, is it a poem or a song, which is the I shot an arrow up into the air, it fell to earth.
A poem.
I know not where. Which I've heard before. I've heard it brought up before. It was in a Twilight Zone episode actually. I
shot it. Yeah, it's the title.
This is kind of just like going through Oliver's life as more of this poem is told every couple of pages, and it's kind of showing different parts. And the whole kind of thing is the idea that, you know, life isn't just one continuous straight line. Much like an arrow, you know, there's a lot of like things that affect the direction it's firing, momentum, gravity, so on, so on. And the idea that his relationship with Dinah, his relationship with children, his relationship with whoever, has, you know, altered where he's went. And it's kind of just like a tone story. There's not really a story to it. It's more, this poem plays out as we get sort of like little slices of life kind of sprinkled throughout as it's going. And the art here is by Christopher Mitten. So I have to admit, I thought this was just okay. I wasn't in love with this.
So I like it for him being able to balance the poem with Ollie's life. Him being Ram V able to put the Longfellow poem and how that works with Ollie on who his character is. Because, you know, I hadn't looked at this poem since high school probably. But just the whole idea that, you know, they shot an arrow into the air, didn't know where it went. And then, with, you know, I breathed the song into the air, it fell to earth, I knew not where. And then, so basically, you know, you end up coming across these things that you put out into the world. And right, so he was just this guy at the beginning who was just launching arrows indiscriminately, right, off of the yacht. He gets, you know, shipwrecked, has to become this hero. And then as he goes, you know, he comes across Dinah, and, you know, ends up falling in love. And, you know, through here, it shows that by the end, who he is someone that actually has a purpose, right? And he's looking at these kids as they overlook Star City or Seattle. And I liked how that, you know, how Ram V played with that poem.
I mean, obviously, I've been loving what Ram V's been doing, and you know, and pretty much everything I've been reading from him.
Yeah.
I think this just kind of falls slightly, as eloquently as it's done, it falls a little bit into that trap that a lot of these anthologies do, where some stories feel more like they're just recapping like the history of the character, as opposed to just telling a story. And I you know, I think that just made it feel a little bit more okay to me than great or whatever.
Okay.
So, you know, I mean, it's not. I don't feel strongly about it.
No, I liked it. And then this artist, you know, we end up seeing in Infinite Frontier in those special. I think he does 2 of the issues.
Okay.
So, yeah, seems like they're getting some good work.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was fine.
There's a couple pages called "Lessons in Friendship with Oliver Queen."
Yeah.
I did not read this. I have to admit, I
skipped it too.
Yeah. So, on to the next one, which is basically that we don't actually get much of the story here, but you can kind of get from the implications that effectively we have a Connor Hawke and a Die Hard scenario where he's in a building with terrorists, and there's like the one cop on the outside who's arguing that there's a Green Arrow inside, and he's there to save everyone, and everyone's like, "Isn't Green Arrow dead? What's, you know, like what's going on?"
Yeah, this is definitely in the Ollie died and now Connor Hawke has taken over. While is this the one where he's talking about his not knowing his dad, but still trying to live up to, trying to live up to the memory. Is that the story?
I presume it wasn't on any more Connor Hawk stories, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's at the beginning where he says, "My name's Connor Hawk, and my father was Oliver Queen." Desperate to connect. Yeah. I didn't know if that was bleeding over with the Robin stuff from last week.
I think for me, this is one that's kind of like this is less of a story, although it's got a diehard setup, but it's more about the style of the fighting because it's kind of there to showcase the art. And it's called One because the idea is that it's counting down the number of henchmen that he's taken out. So you kind of get these different numbers that get mentioned, and then you have him like talking over the walkie-talkie to him or whatever, and saying, "Are there any left? How many hostiles left?" And he says, "Yeah." And there's like just one guy in front of him, and he says "One," and that's like the. I mean, it doesn't even say it. We just get the title "One," so it kind of ends the story with the title, which is kind of neat. And they're also right. It's not. Sometimes the muscles on the bad guys are a little bit over the top, but
yeah, it definitely feels like comics of that era of like the late '90s, which I think that's a pretty good job.
Sure, yeah.
Making you feel like it's of that era.
What I will say about it though is that it always seems to have a nice bit of energy and motion. Like I don't necessarily always think that the faces are great or whatever, but I always feel a sense of movement. So I think that counts for something. So that's kind of neat. It's all right. Yeah, it's an all right story.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Who was the art on that? That was Jorge Corona with Brandon Thomas writing on that one. So that's cool. So this next one actually kind of falls into the trap that I was mentioning earlier about just kind of recapping a character's history. However, I think this one's done so well that I'm giving it a pass.
Yeah, and so there's some that are exceptions to that rule because of what Devin Grayson does here with basically not just the Legend of Green Arrow, but for Speedy and Roy, and especially as we're getting to Roy in Infinite Frontier.
It feels more relevant, but I mean, I would say it's more about Roy than it is about Green Arrow. I mean,
no, it is, but I mean, what I mean is about the Legend of Green Arrow and how almost that Roy's been in a struggle to define himself his whole career, right? And that what that means with following in the steps of Green Arrow, as we're having Lian also in the story, a young version of her. So this one's called Green Man and Autumn Sun by Devin Grayson, art and colors by Matt.
And obviously, this is not in current continuity.
No,
and in a strict sense. So this is Oliver's babysitting. While Roy is out doing, arrowy things, being a vigilante. And basically, over the phone, his daughter wants to hear the story of the Green Man and Autumn Sun. And it's basically just Roy's story. It's where he came from, about the Nahavo people that he grew up with, and then being kind of taken in by Oliver, and the kid's got this excitement because she keeps kind of like jumping in to finish sentences or finish like or say the next part or whatever, and he talks about not fitting in, and he talks about Oliver leaving with Hal and how he fell in hard times and he felt lonely and he turned to drugs, and there's all this honest, and Oliver's like, "You told her that." You told her that.
It's he was trust. If she knows I'm not a perfect person, then it's gonna make it a lot easier to parent. And
I understand. I understand. I'm saying, but Oliver has a natural reaction because she is pretty young. It's a pretty weird thing to tell someone who's that young.
Right, but in the context of, in the context of how Roy grew up, right? So there's that trust there that wasn't there with Ollie and Roy almost. Where she says, "I realized early on that I'll never be as smart as her, so the least I can do is be honest." So just that there's this open relationship between those two. And then as she's recounting the story to him and whatnot over the phone, she's drawing, and it ends up being a picture of Ollie and her and Roy and as a family, and it's really heartwarming.
But yeah, to not skip ahead to that though, we have like when they come back and they find Roy this way, and it shows that the Titans were there for him. It shows you that Dinah was there for him. Oliver obviously was there for him. It's kind of this sweet kind of just, it really is a summary of like Roy Harper's like typical backstory of all the various things that the character that are important to him, that are perhaps going to be relevant forever, his history with drugs, all that kind of stuff. And he gets home and they hug, and it's kind of a sweet ending. But there's this little statement at the end, which I thought was kind of a really nice sentiment for them to throw in here, which is to say that this story is somewhat inspired because the Navajo people have this thing where they really see the importance of telling stories like this and sort of recounting their past, and that this is kind of an attempt to kind of have that part of Roy's history be included in the story. And they even say, we encourage you to seek out voices of Navajo people and understand how they tell stories. And there's a really nice sentiment. It was like, we need a variety of voices, we need authentic voices, we have to challenge our understanding of how stories are and how important they are. I mean, it was hard to like find fault in this. It was really well told. It was really sweet, and it's kind of grounded Roy in like what he means to the people around him. But then you add on this like extra real world context at the end of like, hey, this is us trying to like celebrate a part of his past that has maybe been just used as a plot point before. Yeah. But here we're going to use it to actually enhance how he thinks and sort of relate that to where he came from. So I thought that was neat. So yeah. I wasn't expecting to come out of this thinking maybe. I don't know. We'll see what I think of the rest. But at this point, this might have been my favorite one thus far. And I don't think I was going into this going, "Oh, that Devin Grayson one, that's going to be better than the Tom Taylor and the Mariko Tamaki stories."
Yeah, once I saw the whole thing about reaching out to find authentic Navajo stories from storytellers, and I was like, man, that is because you forget about Roy's backstory. They always just kind of skim over that. So the fact that she's putting the spotlight
comes
on
up,
it,
here or there. I remember during the Rebirth run, there was like a brief, like 2-parter or whatever, where it was about Roy's going back to his people, kind of thing. But like, it doesn't come up that often, so it was kind of a nice way.
So I like that, and the sentiment's really nice there. So, but yeah, this one was really good. That's why I so far we're about halfway through, and I'm just like, this is a really solid anniversary issue or anthology, whatever we're calling these.
Yeah. Next up, we got Star City Star. This is Phil Hester with Phil
Hester.
I assume the art is also Phil Hester because it just says inks by Andy Park, so I assume Phil Hester's doing the art too. So this is a weird story, actually, where Oliver's looking for a girl named Star, and he's fighting on a onomatopoeia, and there's a really good joke here actually at the start where I love like him shouting out like the sound effect of what he's about to do with the axe. I thought was actually really funny.
Schlunk. Just the fun words that you get to use.
Or even Oliver saying, what sounds it's going to make when I, hit you with this boxing glove arrow, and then it makes a point of having the sound effect like in big bold text, just so you it's like this like the payoff to the joke. But it gets a bit weird because Count Vertigo shows up, and then Hal Jordan shows up and starts fighting him, and it's like, what the hell's going on here?
Yep.
And it's teased early in the story that this girl Star is special, that she has this ability to basically get in people's heads and convince them to do things. So it becomes clear by the end of the story that she's actually making Oliver like see these people and fight these people. They're not really there. They're not actually happening. And it's all about her being too scared to trust people. And it's when she brings up Mia when he's like, wait, if you dug into my head and you got that far, then you should know me better by now. I should have an understanding that I won't hurt you. And it's just the ending's kind of sweet. It was a bit of a weird journey to get there, though. It felt like we had to have a story that got a lot of these villains in it, so we came up with a premise to sort of justify seeing them all.
And it's also very much of the Kevin Smith era, the Return of Ollie, because Hester is the one that did the art there. I tried to get into that. I got about 2 or 3 issues in, and it's very hard to read. Now I'm a Kevin Smith fan, but it's very, very wordy. So thankfully, this was a lot less wordy. But you almost feel like if Kevin Smith he could have helped out on the story. I think that's kind of what they were going for. But ultimately I like the sentiment, but it was a kind of weird read because I was feeling lost, and I think that's the point. But that's not a fun spot to be in as you're going through the story. Because all of a sudden Hal Jordan's there and Hal's, beating him up and whatnot. So,
yeah. It's like there's no real sign that anything is weird about the fight until Hal's just randomly there also fighting him. Yeah. And it's like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, because I could buy Onomatopoeia and Count Vertigo trying to get their hands on this girl, right?
Yeah.
That's very much... But then for Hal just to show up and then start with him...
which is fine if you've already set up the idea that this is in his head, then we know, anything's fair game. Like, anyone can show up and can be acting out of character and whatever. But because it presents it as fairly straightforward up until that point, it's just kind of like, wait, what's going on? I thought I missed the page. I was like, what's happening? Yeah. Am I missing panels here? What's going on? But the art's solid, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Phil Hester, that's primarily an artist, so and it feels like that late '90s, those clean, solid lines. It's very representative of an era.
Yeah, it's got a lot of those deep blacks where the shadows will be really harsh and full, rather than shaded or anything like that. They'll just be sort of big blocky blacks, which gives it a nice look. It's just not a bad look by any means. So cool. So the next story is one that goes back to focus on Oliver and Dinah, where they're having their anniversary, and he's got something planned for her. She thinks that him being kidnapped by Deathstroke is a surprise fake kidnapping. Turns out it's a real kidnapping. He bought her tickets to a thing. So she shows up, and so the whole point of this is the idea that they don't necessarily always have to be honest with each other, but they just have to understand each other. And that's the sentiment that this story sort of gets across. So we get Dinah, doing her big scream, double page spread. Oliver suiting up and then being like, honestly, my favorite part of this might have been Slade going, I just took a job to keep you distracted while something else was going on. Although I'm starting to regret hearing this bickering that I didn't up the job for free.
Yeah. So, and I know it's kind of because of Arrow, to show that we get Deathstroke kind of against these two, but it feel like it's a natural fit. That of course Slade and Ollie would be on opposite sides of things. It felt...
I think Slade's inclusion in this anthology is probably because of the show, and that made a lot of people associate Deathstroke with Green Arrow. However, I mean, Deathstroke gets paid to show up in so many different books. It doesn't feel like a play. It doesn't feel forced.
No, that's what I mean. But it's such a natural fit that
Matt,
I actually am like...
That's that grunt we always hear.
So, as I was saying, Deathstroke feels like such a natural fit as an antagonist to Ollie that I like seeing this pairing even without the show. Like it's something that just makes sense for me.
It's because he doesn't have superpowers. Like it can be more of a fight because he's a really great human villain, but he's not like flying around or shooting fire out of his eyes or whatever. So yeah, that was Vita Ayala on that story with Laura Braga on the art.
It's the first time I've really thoroughly enjoyed a Vita Ayala story. Because they've been pretty okay.
That is not true, Matt. That is not true.
Why?
The Dead Man mini from like way early in Rebirth. That was great.
That was Vita Ayala?
I'm pretty sure that was Vita Ayala.
Oh shoot. Well, let's narrow it back down to anthologies.
Okay, sure.
A lot of the Futures End stuff I read with their name on it. It was kind of like, this is okay. It's not my type of thing. This though, I think that they had the voices down for all the characters, and I think they work really well with Laura Braga on the art. And it just like I felt like the action sequences here were pretty nice. Like the layouts when Dinah uses the scream, and each concentric green's a different part of the fight. I like that a lot.
I'll say I enjoyed it well enough. I didn't think there was anything special about it. That one in particular, but it did look fine, and the characterization, like you say, was fairly on point. There's a couple of funny lines or moments that I got a kick out of. And I think like the Ben Percy and the Otto Schmidt, which it straight up looks like the Rebirth run, and we even have the supporting cast popping up.
felt like a warm hug.
It was hard not to feel nostalgic for this now. It's kind of weird that we've been doing this show long enough that the run that was started when we started this show is now something we feel nostalgic for whilst talking about it on the show. But hey, that shows that we've got the experience and the credibility now.
Yes.
We're a tenured podcast. So yeah, Malcolm Merlin snooping around, and the whole sentiment for this story, because typically these anthologies, each story will have a single sentiment about the character, and the sentiment here is that Oliver Queen can't be a loner, right? He used to think he was, but he's got a team. He's got Dinah, of course. He's got Emiko. He's got Diggle. He's got Henry. And because he's off hunting on his own, he might have gotten taken out. He might have struggled to fight Merlin. But of course, the others all show up and help fight. The action looks fantastic. Yeah, I miss reading the Schmidt, Percy book. Just I mean, the art was so good.
Yeah. I mean, the stories would fluctuate from time to time. I mean, I like Percy's run a whole lot, but this again felt like a nice warm hug from a friend that you haven't seen in a while, and this is a version of Ollie and Green Arrow that I really enjoy. So to see Emmy there and then Dig, and they're in that treehouse like kind of base that they had, the Sherwood Forest vibes.
Yeah, because that was later on in the run as well. So this feels like it's very connected to the end of his run.
Right. The only way it gets more Ben Percy is if he had the Ollie werewolf from right before. Was that right before Rebirth?
Well, I never read it, so yeah, it was before Rebirth.
Yeah, it must have been. But yeah, I just thought, seeing Emmy again, working with Ollie, whole lot of fun. We all know I have a soft spot for that character. So, but then, so to get a Percy and Schmidt story back to back with the Lemire and Sorrentino, we're just spoiled at this point.
Yeah, well, this is the funny thing. I don't have the same adoration of the Lemire Sorrentino run that you and Connor do. Obviously, the art's fantastic, and the art is fantastic in this short story. But I don't know, for a variety of reasons, I just wasn't as into it. I didn't necessarily care that much about the mythology it was adding, even though I typically love Jeff Lemire. But I think I tend to prefer Jeff Lemire's creator-owned stuff than I do his superhero stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
So, so the ending of this one's a bit weird for me. I if this is harkening back to things in that run, I don't know what it is. So,
well, it's basically him closing the loop of where his story began and where it ended and where he, so I would say metaphorically here, him going to the island and basically handing over this arrow to his past self.
Yeah, I don't think
closing the loop.
I don't think I ever finished the run. I obviously I got the idea of him handing the arrow to the younger self. Yeah. The idea of the that element of it, right? Because obviously he goes to the island. He's an old man. He tells he's the guy in the boat to go, and he's like, "You sure, Mr. Queen?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm sure. Don't come back." And he just goes into the forest, and he sits down. He's got the arrow, and then he sort of combusts into flames at the end of his journey.
Like a phoenix, like a phoenix, rise again.
Yeah. This idea that the island was a place where he was reborn originally. I get the metaphor, but I was wondering, because I never finished that run in the first place. I wasn't sure if this was something specific that was set up or harkening back to, or no. Okay.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's been a while since I read it, but I do love that whole arc. The whole Lemire is one of my favorite runs, but it's been a while since I read it. However, I think it's more metaphorical here. Is like you said, like a phoenix, he's going to be reborn, and this is a cycle that's going to perpetuate, the here. But I mean, him handing over that arrow, which was so integral to that story, I could see how you would think, like you felt like you were missing something. But I like, and again, the Sorrentino art just is fantastic. So seeing the high contrast panels, like where he does the whole background color. Like, sometimes it'd be red, sometimes it's green.
That stuff looks great. Yeah, there's no denying that. I should probably go back and just reread that run at some point.
I would.
And finish it this time.
Hey, patrons, make him read that when he's done with Animal Man.
Yeah, there's a connection there, because Lemire also wrote some Animal Man.
He did.
So, a couple other pages, and then the final story of the book, which I didn't really, I mean, obviously I could have looked down and saw the name Larry O'Neill, right, the writer, but I never really clicked or I really paid attention to it. So I got to this final story, and it's completely voiceless, other than like one phrase at the very very end, and it's basically Denny O'Neill's story told in silent comic book form. And it's the whole idea of him imagining storytelling. So you see him as a little boy at the start, and he's got like a sort of like cowboy hat shaped bubble above his head with like a
listening. Yeah,
he's listening
because he's listening to the radio.
Yeah, he's listening to the old wireless. But so he's hearing a cowboy story, so he's thinking about cowboys, and then we see him thinking about Superman in a Superman sort of shaped bubble when he's looking at a comic, and then he's off in the Navy, and he's thinking about a gun and like a gangster story or something. And then it keeps going. The idea is called Tap 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 because he becomes a writer and he's tapping away on a keyboard. And there's even kind of a Captain America. I mean, obviously there's not enough detail to get them sued.
No,
but
I mean, if that's how he broke in, right? I mean, this is basically a biography by his son.
In many ways, and it showed him in different time periods. Showed you him with his first baby, him proposing, him writing various different characters, going to see movies. I particularly liked when he's an older man with his wife, and I mean, there's a sad part that his wife, I assume, died first because she disappears like halfway through this page. But the idea that they watched like some of the early Batman movies together, and then he's on his own and he's watching all the other movies that have existed now in TV shows. Because that's what that felt like to me. Was all these different symbols around the TV. And then he's getting kind of old, and he's clearly getting weaker as he's tapping on his story, and we see him in the bed, and then the final page is the once again the very first thing we saw him dreaming of, which was the cowboy story, fades from the cowboy hat bubble, and we just see the green hand on his hand, and it just says "Good night, Pops," and then the final panel is all of these characters that he worked on at some point, standing around his hospital bed, and it says Dennis O'Neill, 1939 to 2020. This was a wonderful little tribute, and it was one of those things where I realized like halfway through what it was. I'm like, wait a minute, this is really specific. This is about a writer, and then I looked at the name and went, oh, this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of Green Arrow, it's that Hard Traveling Heroes.
Oh yeah,
that Denny O'Neill and Neil Adams did. So to throw this in here on a Green Arrow, it's a natural fit. And to have Green Arrow be the one that's holding his hand at the end.
Yeah, and then of course, because one of the things you see him writing at one point is The Question, which also was, has one of his big runs.
Well, and then you have Bruce and Talia there with the heartbreak on one of the panels there. You know, because he created Ra's al Ghul and Talia and that. So, just that last panel. Yeah, this story hit hard. I saw Connor talk about it, about how absolutely gutted it made him, and I was like, oh no, because there's two ways to read that, right? That it kind of fell on its face, but no, it's definitely very effective. And I mean, Fornes, come on, and he's definitely doing this because of the Rorschach book, right? You would think that's the.
It feels like the obvious connection to me.
Yeah.
It was hard not to be kind of moved by it. It was kind of it was a hell of a tribute, and Green Arrow is one of the characters you associate with Denny O'Neill more than many. So it's hard to fault it. It's really hard to fault it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, the standard's fairly high. There's maybe 2 or 3 that I'm not super hot on.
Yeah.
In the book. Which is probably better than average for sure with these anthologies. But not that I had a bad time reading it by any means, because I think I mean, don't get me wrong, if this was on a week with we had like 6 or 7 or 8 other books and I had to read this at the end, I might have been a bit more in a mood having to like plow through it. This been on a 5th week where there was just a couple other things to read. It wasn't it was a pleasant afternoon time of some Green Arrow, and it does help that there's not been any Green Arrow in a while, on his own.
That too. I mean, the most I can think of lately was in Deceased, right? And then right now in Justice League with Bendis. So it feels nice.
Yeah. So not bad. It's not bad. If you like Green Arrow, you probably get something out of this. What are you going to give the anthology, Matt?
Well, I think I enjoyed this a little bit more than you did. I'm going to give this an 8.5.
I'll just go straight 8. I mean, I think it's good. I think some of the stories go a little bit above me. I think the Nahavo story about Roy, I think, is really good. Obviously, the tribute at the end is quite heartwarming. And then it was kind of surprising to me that I didn't love, say, Ram V and Tamaki stories a bit more than I did. But so maybe there's a little minor disappointment there, which is why I'm not as super hot on it. But not that they're bad by any means. They're just I come into it. There's certain writers that I expect to be blown away by, but there's some quality stuff in there.